At 13, I was gang raped by 2 men. Very violent, and it lasted maybe about 4 to 5 hours.
It wasn't an isolated incident, unfortunately, either, was it?
So it took till I was like early 50s to realise there were 3 other times before I was 18. He threatened me with a knife, that he'd used a knife on me already, and he told me that if you tell anyone, that we'll find you and we'll kill you. And I guess I looked into his eyes and I thought, yeah, I think actually you are quite capable of killing me. I really believe that. I couldn't speak, I couldn't eat, I hated myself, and I was just a normal girl the day before, and then I wasn't this normal girl. They didn't kill me. I'm still alive. I know I'm not what they did to me. I'm not my body. I'm not even my name. You know, we're all so much more than what happens to us. We're not the events in our life. But this didn't happen overnight, you know. I know you want some hope, but it was a process. It's not a sprint. It is a marathon. It really was. And many, many years of therapy. But it was always, my intention was, I'm going to heal this. I'm going to recover one day. I'm going to get past this. And something just always drove me to that end.
What would you like written on your gravestone?
What would I like written on my gravestone? I guess unbroken.
Wow.
Yep. Oh, that's maybe quite emotional.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yep.
You are unbroken and an absolute hero in my eyes. Welcome to School of Rock Bottom with Oliver Mason. I'm an actor, a voiceover artist and a recovery coach who's been sober 9 years, and I know firsthand that rock bottom can be the greatest teacher and the springboard for a beautiful life. And as you know, I interview fellow creatives and all inspiring people that have hit rock bottom, survived and thrived. This is a podcast of hope and how to get out of the darkness into the light, and that's why I'm so excited today, because I have got the marvellous and magnificent Madeleine Black in the studio.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming to see me today.
Pleasure.
I really, really appreciate it. All the way from Scotland.
Sunny Glasgow.
Sunny Glasgow. I'm so grateful and thankful that you've come to see me. I just want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, which is Gavin Sisters. Head to the show notes for more on them and more about them later on. Now, before we dive straight in, we're just going to do a quick bio, because if you don't know Madeleine, shame on you, you will do now. So Madeleine Black is an author, professional speaker, sexual violence activist, former psychotherapist, and has a podcast show called Unbroken, Healing Through Storytelling. After decades of silence, Madeleine decided to share her own story publicly online in September 2014, and she completely underestimated what the response would be. She is passionate about speaking out to end the shame, stigma, and silence surrounding sexual violence, and to help others find their courage and voice too. Wow, what an intro. We're now going to go on a journey to find out much more about Madeleine's story. A slight trigger warning, there may be references to sexual violence and rape throughout this discussion. Madeleine, you obviously know how I'm going to start the podcast. I always start it in the same way, and that is to take us back to one of your rock bottom moments. But from there, we will get into the hope, the light, and the joy.
Okay. So my rock bottom moment, as you've said we're going to speak about rape, is that I was a victim of rape. So at 13, I was gang raped by 2 men. And it was the darkest moments of my life ever.
Having read your book over the last few days, without going into any detail around it, it really struck me the sort of level of violence that you were submitted to at such a young age. Yeah. And it wasn't an isolated incident, unfortunately, either, was it? It happened a couple more times as well.
Yeah, it was only in my 50s when I was writing my memoir that these other times came to me. I had no idea at those moments that was also called rape, because there's many side effects that a person can have after they've been raped. And I just thought I'd had loads of bad sex. I became very promiscuous. And when I was writing my memoir, it just became very clear that there was no consent at all on my behalf. I wasn't able to say yes, and they just carried on anyway. So it took till I was like early 50s to realise there were 3 other times before I was 18. I did what most people did when they were younger. I went on a night out with a friend at school. She was one of the really cool kids in the class, and we lied about where we were staying, and we bought alcohol, and I'd never drunk before, so obviously it didn't take very long. I was drunk really, really quickly, and 2 of the guys at our table where we were drinking in secret took us back to her mum's flat, which was the empty flat, because we lied about where we were staying. So nobody knew where I was at that point. And I naively thought that they were there really to help me, to let me sleep off the alcohol, get me out the clothes I'd been sick in. But yeah, it became really obvious that they were there for something else. And they were, as you say, very violent, and it lasted maybe about 4 to 5 hours. And I totally disassociated that night. I completely left my body. So I was there, but I wasn't really there. And I think that disassociation helped on that night, but it also didn't help when I was trying to get my memories back. It felt very dreamlike because I wasn't really present, which now as a psychotherapist, I understand that we get out of the way when there's huge trauma, that it makes sense for our mind and our body not to be present, because I think if I'd stayed in, I might not be here today. I don't think I would have survived it. But so for years, I just wanted to get my memories back and to land back in my body, because I know that I never really connected back in my body after that night. And then when I got my memories back many years later, I didn't trust my memories and I didn't want to believe my memories. So it's been a very interesting journey along the years.
Yeah. What really struck me reading your book was how alone you were with what happened.
Yeah.
And having read your book, I fully understand why you felt like you couldn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
But I guess somebody kind of superficially coming across your story, I say superficially because maybe they might have only just heard your story from this little microcosm of what we've just spoken about. I think some people would be screaming, why didn't you tell anybody? Because it took you many years, didn't it?
Many, many years. Well, it took me about 3 years to tell my parents.
Yeah.
I think to start with, there was so much shame, so much guilt and fear. So the one, I think I just call him the worst one. He threatened me with a knife, that he'd used a knife on me already. And he told me that if you tell anyone, that we'll find you and we'll kill you. And I guess I looked into his eyes and I thought, yeah, I think actually you are quite capable of killing me. I really believe that. And that threat stayed with me, and the shame, and also would people believe me because I'd been drinking and, I'd lied to my parents. All the victim blaming stuff, I was feeding it to myself. And it was the late 1970s, so there wasn't really any social media about, but I had already ingested all the messages that society gives out to victims of this kind of crime.
What really struck me as well was how badly you were let down by your friend as well at the time, who didn't sort of corroborate what you said. And then all the kind of gaslighting that went on at school in terms of the version of events that were then told. Yeah. And then, I mean, I'll let you sort of describe it because I feel it would be unfair for me to describe it, but you were sort of painted in a certain way, I believe, at school. And I think you said in the book something along the lines of, well, that's what they thought I was like, so that's what I sort of became.
And self-perpetuate what they feel about. And that, when I said at the start, I became very promiscuous. Yeah. So I think afterwards, if somebody tried it on with me, I just didn't care. I had no self-respect for my body. I just thought, well, that's all I'm worth. And also I was very scared that if I did fight back, then it would get violent again. Yeah. So I don't know what it was like for the other person, but I would just let them do whatever they wanted. So I was just in a really bad space, not caring about myself, what people did to me. And yeah, I earned a name, I guess is what they would say, a reputation at school, completely the opposite of what had happened to me. Yeah. But, my memories of what had happened were still very hard to grasp. They were still very distant. And I diminished it for years, thinking it wasn't really rape. I had invited it in because I was drunk or whatever. But actually, when all my full memories returned, it was, far worse than I really thought it had been. Yeah.
Obviously, you were very unwell that night when it happened through drinking. Yeah. Obviously, someone on my own recovery journey. I mean, I'm certainly not anti-alcohol. I am for myself. Yeah. But, there's a big proportion of people that listen to this podcast that are in recovery from alcohol and substances as well. It kind of struck me what a pivotal role alcohol played that night. I just wondered if you view it in the same way that I do, because I very much look at it that you were kind of poisoned by a liquid, because, had you not have been drunk, probably wouldn't have happened. Yeah. Is that fair to say?
I don't know. I think if someone is on a mission to set out to rape someone and to find someone. Yes, I was maybe made more vulnerable because of the drink, but I guess we have to be careful that we don't then start blaming the drink, because at the end of the day, it was two men who chose to rape me. It wasn't the alcohol that caused the rape.
Yeah.
I might have not had my senses, so heightened, but it came down to the fact that these two men chose to rape me, and that's really all there is to blame.
Yeah. I mean, how do you feel about it now, sort of looking back, particularly being a mum of 3 girls and all the rest of it? I mean, it's amazing that drinking rates with young people are absolutely plummeting. Mm. But I just wondered how you feel about it now, because obviously, like, if heroin was legal and kids were going out and doing heroin on the weekend, I think we'd be more likely to kind of put the blame with heroin, but because it's alcohol and it's socially acceptable. But it does put people in a very vulnerable situation. Would you not agree, in terms of like being out and about? And, I think you call it a sedative in the book. You were sedated, which is what it does.
Yeah, I think I used it afterwards really just to numb out. I didn't want to think, I didn't want to feel, I didn't want any emotions. And before my family even knew what had happened to me, they called me the Ice Maiden, because I was so numbed out and cut off. Yeah. But it's a very tricky conversation really, isn't it? Because it's not the alcohol. It's not, that's, if they wanted to do it to me, they could have done it to me anyway, and I would have been paralyzed by fear. Right. Because I did sober up, I think, halfway through, and when I was aware what was going on. Yeah. And when I tried to fight back, it got worse. And so then I just allowed it, and that's when I really left my body. So yes, I might have been vulnerable to start with, but I think if someone's going to choose to rape you, you're vulnerable anyway, whether you've been drinking or not, or doing drugs, whatever. I
was curious as well. This is a potentially really tricky question. Obviously, it was heartbreaking what happened to you when you described the rock bottom, but for then it to happen a couple more times. Mm-hmm. I guess my question that I was interested to ask you when I was reading that part of the book was, do you think if you've been a victim of rape that it makes you more likely to be a victim of rape again?
Well, I can only talk for my own situation, and I think because I had this total lack of self-respect, of self-care, I had maybe walked into situations that weren't so great for me, or the people that I chose, I had no self-worth or no self-confidence. So I guess it did seem to follow a pattern that the particular people that I encountered were, they could maybe sense my radars of something had happened.
Right. Which I guess really compounds something that I know you're so passionate about speaking out. Yeah. Do you feel that if you'd have had the opportunity to speak out, I say opportunity because no one asked you, did they?
No.
No one asked you what happened?
No, I attempted suicide, and I had my 14th birthday in a children's psychiatric ward where I'd spent about 5 or 6 months. And when I wrote my memoir, I asked for my notes, which wasn't easy to read. It was really difficult. But I just wanted to see if they had any idea what had happened to me, and nothing in my notes suggested they knew I'd had this massive trauma. They just put me down as a troubled adolescent with anorexia. Right. So, and I Googled one of the professors he is now who looked after me at the time, and he went on to specialize in trauma in teenagers. And I think, oh my God, you didn't even know what happened to me. Surely it must have been obvious. I couldn't speak, I couldn't eat, I hated myself, and I was just a normal girl the day before, and then I wasn't this normal girl. But my mum was unwell at the time, and they put it down to maybe it was because of that, and we had nurses in the home looking after my mum and people looking after the 5 kids, and they thought maybe it was to do with all the upheaval at home. Right. But it wasn't. It was other stuff, but no one ever asked me the right questions. They always focused on my behavior rather than say what had happened to you. Rather they just focused on why she behaving like that.
I don't expect you to know the answer to this. Was it anorexia or was it a reaction to the trauma, or can't you split the two?
Well, for me, I just I shut down.
Yeah,
and I don't know. Maybe looking back, just my behavior, maybe I thought people might guess that something had happened. Maybe that was part of it. This is just me from this age of nearly 60 trying to analyze a 13-year-old's head. Maybe I thought they would guess that something was bad. But at the time, I just restricted my eating and my drinking. I think I lived off an apple and chewing gum and black coffee most days, and that was it. Because that was the only thing I could control. I couldn't control the darkness inside me. I couldn't control the feelings of feeling worthless and contaminated and just nothing, just dirty. I just hated myself, really loathed myself, but I could control not eating. So I think it was the only thing I could control, and then that turned into an eating disorder.
I understand.
So it wasn't because I wanted to look thinner, then it was getting attention, but they still couldn't guess what had happened to me. They just put me down as an anorexic.
I mean, there's so many threads to this of how many things you've survived. I mean, obviously, what happened to you in and of itself is gargantuan, but, to throw in kind of numbing out with drugs and alcohol, battling anorexia, which is the #1 cause of all mental illness deaths, the fact that you've survived so many multiple things is a real testament to you. I mean, as soon as I met you today, I was so grateful to have this time with you, because, wow, how many things you've had to survive and get through has been enormous.
I don't think my story is that uncommon. It's just a story of many, many people. Maybe the many people aren't as vocal as me, as I am now, that can share my story, but it's so many people will, if they hear me speak, will come up to me afterwards and say, yeah, it was as if you were saying my story, it was exactly the same, or that happened to me, or someone's read my book and messages me, you could have just changed your name for mine, it was so similar. So it's not an uncommon story at all.
Yeah. I'm going to pick out a few bits from the book that, for me, when I was reading it, I was thinking, wow, I've got the opportunity to actually ask the author these questions. There's a couple of things that you said, which I found really, really, really interesting. You said in the book, and I wasn't quite sure what you meant by this, you said 100% of all rapes are caused by rapists.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Nothing else. It's not the clothes that you wore. It's not the fact that I lied. It's not the alcohol I drank. It's not being in the wrong place where I should be somewhere else. It came down to what I said before. These men made that choice.
Yeah.
And that's it. Because there's so much victim blaming. There's so much rape culture around. And, we blame her because she was wearing this, or she went to his hotel room, or she went to this party. There's nothing to do with that. Yeah. We know that babies are raped. We know that women in burqas are raped. It wasn't their clothes. Yeah. So 100% of all rapes are caused by rapists.
Wow, so powerful and so true. The work I do in treatment centres, I'm very, very passionate about talking to this. There's a lot of people, obviously I specialise in substance misuse and alcoholism and things like that. And a lot of people come into early recovery feeling abused, feeling abandoned, feeling upset and angry, and a real strong sense of wanting revenge. And something that I always say is the best revenge is to get happy. Yeah. And that was a common thread throughout your book. Yeah. Just wondered if we could expand on that.
It wasn't for a long time. So for a long time, I did have these vengeful thoughts. I wanted somebody to do the same to them. I wanted someone to kidnap them, take them to an empty flat, tie them up, beat them up, and rape and torture them for years. But then I saw that anger and that rage and the revenge that I was holding on to, they didn't have any idea. It was only harming me. So when I met Stephen, my husband, 42 years ago, something like that, just a few years ago.
Big up, Stephen.
When I told him, when he asked me to marry him about 5 years after we met, I said, I'm never going to become a mum, because I just thought giving birth would just be too much like being raped. I just had this image of being surrounded by men and my feet in stirrups and them all looking up my cervix, and it just freaked me out. So the way I faced my fears in those days was just to avoid things. I thought that's the easiest way. And then, so he was fine, obviously. We got married. And a couple of years later, we were away in Thailand. I remember the beach, the moment. And he just asked me out loud, how about starting a family? And I was ready to say, come on, you know why I've told you this. And it was just this monumental mind shift. Something just came in. I don't even know where it came from. It was so powerful. And I just thought, if I never become a mum, they've won. I'm given all of my power and control over these two men. They don't even have any idea that I'm giving them all of my power and control of my own life. And that's when I came up with what I call my best revenge, that not only was I going to become a mum, but I was going to live my best life. And I was just going to refuse to be identified by what had happened to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So incredibly powerful. I remember working with someone recently that had a particular thing about a certain person, a very, like you say, they're sort of like fantasizing about killing these people. And, he was killing himself with coke and booze, sort of planning this person's demise. Meanwhile, this guy is in a yacht in the south of France without a care in the world for this person. The only person that's getting killed by his anger is himself. And I know this is something that you are really passionate about and you talk about. This word forgiveness, I think, is very misunderstood. I think a lot of people think that by forgiving somebody else, you're excusing their behavior, saying their behavior is okay. What would you say forgiveness has played a role in for you in your healing?
Well, I always say I'm an accidental forgiver because I never intended ever to forgive them, because I wanted them to experience the same thing. And it really took me by surprise as well. And I have to say two things. I'm not a forgiveness preacher. I don't tell people the only way to heal is to forgive. Yeah. And I'll never forgive the act of rape. Never, because it was a total violation, not just on my body, but my mind and my psyche, obviously, which had years of an effect on me. But I think of the word forgiving is for giving me a better chance in life, because it allowed me to let go of all of that resentment and hate and anger and hurt, disappointment, all the negative feelings, and really just realize I can't undo what's happened. It was a huge part of my past. I don't need to carry it on into my future. And I could learn to just accept it and just be at peace with it and just let it go.
Wow.
So it gave me like my key to freedom, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the, my wife's South African, so obviously Nelson Mandela is sort of a big hero in my house, but, he's got the classic quote, isn't he, that if he didn't forgive people that put him in prison, he'd still be in prison.
Absolutely. So it cut my chains literally that tied me to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Incredibly powerful that people find that space to heal, because you're right, it's about healing yourself, isn't it?
And I guess I had to forgive that naive 13-year-old girl who just lied to her parents, went out for a drink, which most people have done. And in my case, it just went horribly wrong. Just met the wrong people at the wrong time. And I had to forgive myself a lot.
That's something that isn't spoken about enough, I think, about forgiving oneself as well, which is obviously as important, if not more important in some ways. It sounds like you've got huge compassion for 13-year-old Madeleine.
I do now. And then interestingly, it was compassion that I started to feel towards them, which really led on to the journey of forgiveness, because I never could have imagined having any compassion. But in my head, I came to the conclusion, I've done a shitload of therapy. I've tried most therapies going, regular ones, alternative ones. Most of them I've tried. But I thought, and I've really come to a good place. I really feel, I couldn't do the work that I do without being healed and grounded and connected. But for them to live with what they did to another human being, I don't think that's easy. And whether they're conscious about it or not conscious about it is going to impact on their life. Yeah. So, and that's when I felt compassion, because I do believe that we all come in this blank slate. Yeah. And I don't think that they were born rapists. And that's the question that my therapist asked me years ago, do I believe that they were born rapists? And, and I couldn't believe that he'd asked me this crazy question, that they didn't come into the world like that. And I thought, of course they did. And then actually, I'm a recent grandma, and I've looked into my little 6-month-old baby's eyes, or I was there when she was born, and she just came in as love, pure love. And that's how we all come into this world. And what went so wrong for them that they could dehumanize someone and degrade someone and just violate someone in that way that night.
It's amazing that you have got that compassion. It's incredible, actually. Yeah, I found one quote of you online, and when I read it, I thought to myself, wow, I'm absolutely definitely going to have to get you in, because it was so School of Rock Bottom. It was just incredible. And the quote is, it's not what happens to us that is important, but what we do with what happens to us. And if we choose to, we can get past anything that happened to us in life. And I thought, wow, that really sums up School of Rock Bottom right there.
So I think I was born to super survivor parents. So my dad was a Holocaust survivor. Right. And his parents, his brothers and sisters, his youngest brother was just 6 years old when he was gassed at Auschwitz. They all lost their life. My mum had her neck broken during an operation. She'd already had a car accident, so her neck was very vulnerable. But I watched both of them thrive in life. And so, I used to think, surely I can get past one night. If he can get past having your whole family murdered and wiped out and coming to Europe and the UK, starting again, learning different languages, meeting my mum, businesses, families. And my mum, she used hypnosis and learned to walk again. She was bedridden for a couple of years. And when I was writing my book, I also researched, I read a book called Super Survivors, and I contacted the writers, that was the co-authors. And I said, is it a genetic thing? Could we have that already in our system, to be born of super survivors? And he said, it's maybe not, it's not a genetic thing. There's not enough research. But he said, you clearly saw that it's possible to move past. And I think I always had hope. I always carried that with me. One of my guests told me she had jumped off a bridge in Australia, like 200, 300 feet up in the sky, and survived, obviously. She was my guest. And she said that hope stands for hold on, pain ends. And whether I was aware of that or not, I knew that there was a way out of it because I watched my dad, not by what he said, but by how he lived his life.
Wow. And did you feel that, sorry to interrupt, did you feel that as a teenager as well? Was it sort of locked into the subconscious even then?
I think so. I just saw that, my dad just used to muck about. He loved life. He was always playing practical jokes. He was always, just laughing. And I think, how could you be like that? So his sister, who did survive the whole of Auschwitz, was chronic schizophrenic, agoraphobic. If she heard a motorbike, it was the Gestapo coming to take her away. She was so locked into the trauma. And my dad covered it up with his laughter. And I didn't always understand the laughter when I was younger, but now I realize that was his strength.
Yeah.
To be able to laugh after and to love life and meet my mum and have 5 kids, it was incredible how he rebuilt his life.
There was moments, wasn't there, I think as a teenager in particular, where you seemed completely devoid of hope. Yeah. But it's amazing that something can kind of be locked in sort of deep in the subconscious that you're not even kind of aware of as well. What struck me as well, particularly when you were processing the trauma, I can't remember the exact quote, but you said something along the lines of trauma can be locked in your cells. You said something like that, and your body can actually literally shake. Yeah. So were you literally shaking from the trauma?
Yeah, it was when I would go for so it was when my oldest daughter Anna became 13. I was also studying psychotherapy, and I was attending loads of personal development workshops, I guess. So the trauma is always going to come back, but it came back then, mainly in my nights, in my dream state. So I went back to therapy. The worst kind of client, because I asked them to take the memories away because I didn't want to see them, but obviously short of a lobotomy, couldn't take my memories away. And I had to really learn to dive into the memories, not run from them, what I'd done for years. I had run from the awful memories. And in the sessions, I had thrown up. My whole body would shake. I would cry, vibrate. And then I got to a point, actually, I could go back now, I don't like to have regrets, that I was getting in the way of the therapy because I just refused to believe it. I just denied it. And I used to say to him, if it was that bad, I would remember it. Surely I would remember it if all the details I'm being shown. I must have made it up. I'd worked at Women's Aid. I'd worked at Rape Crisis. I was training to be a psychotherapist. I'd heard so many stories. I thought I've just ingested other people's stories. Yeah. So he suggested to me to go for some therapeutic body work, some therapeutic massage. And the very first time I went, I just heard this person that was crying and shaking and screaming and fighting with the therapist. And I just thought, God, who's making all that noise? And then I realized it was coming from me. Wow. And that was incredible. That sent me on another journey of therapeutic body work because it's caught in ourselves. I mean, we know, like, if you smell, for example, like rose perfume, you can be transported to your grandma, or if you hear a piece of music, it can take you back to school days, or drive past a particular building, it can stir up memories. So that's a very cellular reaction. So it's definitely held in our body. Or if we're not in a great shape mentally, we can get stomach pains, we can get headaches, we can have autoimmune diseases, loads of things. It's all connected, our mind and body. So I was holding so much of it in my body as well, I didn't realize.
It's amazing, this kind of old school perception that, the mind and body are very separate and these two separate things. And I think even 20 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, there'd be a lot of people that would kind of go, well, they're not as interlinked as one says. I mean, how that just completely disproves that you can literally, shake. A very good close friend of mine, he's a survivor himself and had to work through his own PTSD. And even now to this day, he'll get sort of certain pains in certain parts of the body, and he'll very much go, that pain is, it's me releasing something from the past. And it's I've got huge respect for people that come through and manage PTSD, because it's such a journey, and you've really got to dig deep and do a colossal amount of work.
And most of the journey, you don't know you've got PTSD because you're so reactive. You're just reacting. So I didn't know I had PTSD for years. I was training to be a volunteer at Rape Crisis, and they were talking about the many side effects of rape or PTSD. I went, oh, I've had that or that. The only thing I couldn't do was self-harm because I was terrified of knives. But everything else, like, 14 out of 15 on the list or whatever, I had all of those symptoms. And I thought, I didn't know I had PTSD. I was undiagnosed for years.
Yeah. It's amazing. And that's why I think when I met you, I felt, even though I'd not met you before, slightly emotional to see you, because even though we don't know each other, I've got close friends that have been on similar journeys, obviously not the same. And I know how much work has gone into getting to the place where you can stand on a TEDx stage and be this ambassador for survivors that you are. It's incredible, really. I'm just interested because often when we talk about strength and getting through difficult moments, a lot of it's quite public. I just wondered what strength looks like for you when no one's watching.
Well, I kind of wish that people wouldn't say that I was brave, because I really think that why can't we talk about the difficult things? Why does it have to be named as brave? I just would like everyone to be able to have, I guess, these curious conversations rather than courageous conversations. But what does it look like to me? I think just getting up every day and doing my life and living my best life. That's my strength. You're just never giving in. Or just owning whatever I feel that day. It's okay to feel like that. Before I would have struggled in the past if I was having an off day, but now I don't run from any emotions. I'll sit with them and just allow them to be, because I know we can't stay stuck in one emotion forever. It always moves on, and I just keep chipping away, trying to be the best that I can be of me, whatever that is.
Yeah. Just curious, because I think somewhere in the book you called shame a liar, I believe. Yeah. And my whole thing working with people in recovery is calling addiction a liar. And even though I'm nearly 10 years down the track without a drink, it occasionally can lie to me. And the difference today is I don't believe the lies. But I guess recovery for me, in a quiet moment, a lot of people sort of see me sort of in recovery, out in public, being an ambassador for recovery, and I probably look very strong at all times. But I suppose a quiet moment for me is I'll get the odd thought where actually maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I don't deserve this life, or maybe I'm a piece of shit, and I should just go back to it. Now, I don't believe those moments, but I still have these micro moments where I'm having a little internal battle where I have to kind of like silence those thoughts. I just wondered, do you get any kind of leaking thoughts?
Oh, yeah.
No, okay.
Yeah, so my biggest fear, because my friend betrayed me and I always thought my mum didn't believe me. And now that I'm in such a healed place, I think, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I did exaggerate. And think, where is that coming from? Right. Or maybe people won't believe me when I'm launching my book. Maybe what if they don't believe me? What if they think it's all made up? And, so that I can see is still in there. And interestingly, I thought I'm really healed. I'm okay. I never get triggered. And there's been a couple of things recently. I was with a friend of mine. She was speaking at an event, and they were doing fire walking and walking on glass and the arrow at your throat and snapping it. And I've done all these things before. And they were doing the arrow at my throat. And you walk into you place the arrow against a wooden board, and then you walk towards it, and the arrow snaps in half. And this part here is a very vulnerable part, to even to touch it. And all of a sudden, the arrow just turned into the knife. And I'm known as this professional speaker. It's like a room of 300 women. And I'm like, oh, shit, I'm having a panic attack. I can feel that. But what is good now is that I'm really aware that I'm being triggered. Before, I would have just gone into full-blown trigger, and it could have stayed for days, weeks, months. And now I'm like, you're okay. This is just an arrow. You're in the room. Look around you. There's 300 women. You're safe. It's not happening anymore. And now I just call it like a little memory burp or a trigger burp, that it just unlocked, it just released, a little bit of residue that was left in my body. And at the gym recently, and I have a personal trainer who's a male, we're learning to do pull-ups, because I wanted to be able to do 10 pull-ups before I'm 60. I'm nearly there. And he put the straps around my wrist to help, and all of a sudden I was tied to the radiator with the straps that they used, a pair of tights. And I just had a panic in the gym, and he could see my face. So it's okay, we'll just take this off. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. He goes, you're okay. And he was actually very good. He wasn't aware what was happening. And he said he could never read my book because he would want to go and kill the men, which is quite a common response from quite a few men that I get.
Yeah.
And I said, well, wouldn't that make you as bad as them if you go out and kill them? But that was a whole other conversation. And that really shocked me that just that trauma, and that's where it is held in ourselves. Something just got triggered. But again, I'm able to just sit with it, not run from it, and just connect to myself, breathe, ground myself, and it's gone and done in 5 minutes.
Amazing. Wow. I mean, that's going to give hope to a lot of people, particularly those sort of in amongst PTSD journey or a trauma journey.
This is really about sitting with it and not running. Because for years I just ran. We call it depression because we want to just push everything down. And it's just actually diving in. Go the way in. The way in is always the way out. It has to be.
It was a lovely metaphor that you did for a TED assignment, I guess, or talk. I think you did it during lockdown and filmed it at home, where you had a beach ball. Yeah. And you said holding it underwater is what it feels like to, keep hold of shame. Yeah.
Constantly just, and also the fear of letting it go. That people would then know what had happened to me. Because I thought incorrectly, this is my shame lying, that if people knew what had happened, that they would look at me differently, that they wouldn't want to know me, that they would be disgusted and they would see that I was this damaged or ruined person because of what had happened to me. But it's not true. I've had the opposite since I've gone public. And so Marina, who runs the Forgiveness Project, she calls us story healers rather than storytellers.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've witnessed that so many times, in the sharing of my story, how many people will then come and share their story, because we are mirrors, and I believe that courage is contagious.
Moving into a very connected space now, but slightly different part of the conversation. I've just been watching Adolescence on Netflix. I can't believe how ignorant I was about what's going on online, particularly with young men, but men in general. And then I went onto your Instagram doing some professional stalking, and I could see that, one of the themes within Adolescence, they reference a lot manosphere. Yep. And I was sort of going down a rabbit hole and learning that Andrew Tate is part of this movement, I guess. And I noticed that you were quite vocal, or very vocal on your Instagram about getting some content removed from Spotify. I just wondered if you could tell me what that was about.
I became aware from a post by a woman over in Australia, Renee Chopping, and there's an organisation called Collective Shout, which I think she's involved with. And I wasn't even aware that his content, 3 of his courses, along with some podcast interviews, I believe, were available for anyone to listen to. So we had 2 removed by people signing it. The last one was called Pimping Your Hose. So it kind of suggests exactly what it's all about. And he's a self-confessed misogynist. Yeah. We know he's sexist, and we know he degrades women and coercively controls women, and he likes to get them younger. And some of the quotes that he has said have just been horrific. So it was amazing that they finally gave in to the pressure. A bit worrying that they were put him on their platform anyway without the pressure. Would he still be there for everyone to access freely? And we know there's been a recent case, the Kyle Clifford case, who killed his ex-partner, her sister, and the mother with a crossbow, and he raped her before he murdered her.
Goodness me.
That he had access to Andrew Tate. They know that from his own computer. I mean, I don't know if that's the reason why he then went and killed them. We'll never know. But I think there must be some research to show that there must be some links. And I think when we have this kind of content online, we kind of normalize it and we make it okay because it's so readily available that we minimize actually what these courses are about. This just so degrading to women that it's great that Spotify finally gave in, but he was banned from Twitter. I don't know if he's still there. He will be available in other places, him and his brother.
Yeah. I mean, I can't believe what's going on online. When I went down a real rabbit hole and learned a lot of things that I actually very naively had no idea about. I mean, there's all these different phrases that are used: incel, manosphere, red pill, blue pill, alphas, bigmas, and sigmas. Kidney bean is an emoji that means something apparently. Coffee cups. I mean, I'm not going to break all down what all these things mean now, but
essentially, it's power and control over women.
I had no idea this was even going on. I can't believe where I've been living.
Can you imagine if you had like a teenage boy? I mean, I've got 3 girls. I would be so concerned if my child was accessing this kind of information and thought it was good or thought it was cool.
It's
And
absolutely abhorrent.
want to copy that behaviour in regards to how they treat a woman.
I found a quote here. It said, Tate has previously said that women should bear responsibility for being sexually assaulted, that they belong in the home and that they are a man's property. He's also said that probably 40% of the reason he moved to Romania was because it was easier to evade rape charges. I got this direct quote from the Evening Standard, so I'm assuming it's credible. I couldn't believe what I was reading.
Yeah, I've heard these before.
Right.
Loads of things that he said that are equally as disturbing. Yeah, just to reiterate, it's never the woman's responsibility if she has been attacked, or a man's responsibility if he's been attacked or raped or abused in any way. It always comes down to the perpetrators.
This episode is sponsored by Gavin Sisters, the passionate teetotal founders of the Detox Balm Retreat and the creators of Funky Coffee. If you love the taste of coffee but want to ditch the crash, Funky Coffee is your new go-to. Made from triple certified organic Arabica coffee and infused with powerful mushrooms, it gives you all the energy and none of the jitters. Plus, it's amazing for your gut, skin, and athletic performance. And if you're looking to recharge your body and mind, you've got to check out the Detox Barn. This award-winning retreat, located in both the UK and the Algarve, is a plant-based, alcohol-free sanctuary where you'll learn how to be healthier, happier, and more balanced. Whether it's for a weekend away or a full restorative retreat, just visit gavinsisters.co.uk and use the code School of Rock Bottom for 10% off your next retreat or a bag of their amazing Funky Coffee. That's School of Rock Bottom for a 10% discount for a healthier, happier you. Go check them out.
How do you think we can educate young people about the harmful effects of these kind of online, like it's like terrorism really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like terrorism on women.
Brainwashing, to go into schools, to go into nurseries, to talk about healthy relationships, to talk about consent, and not just, in a sexual relationship. I was forced to go and sit on Santa's knee and get a hug or go and kiss this one goodbye. Make it a choice. Do you want to do that? Or let's go and hug everyone and say goodnight to everyone. Should we still be doing that to children? Give them a choice. So just really, what is a healthy, respectful relationship from a young age?
Yeah.
And boundaries. We don't talk about boundaries. And, kids as young as 8 have iPhones. So we know that kids as young as 8 access porn. Yeah. Young men think that it's normal for women not to kiss when they're having sex because that's what they've learned from porn. So that's where they're getting their education. So we have to give them the facts.
Absolutely. When I was reading about these online platforms and where this kind of misogyny was coming from, they refer to themselves as incels, and they're sort of, from what I could deduce, young men that feel that they're not quite up to kind of the societal norms of like what a man should be. So maybe they feel not as attractive, or maybe not as successful, and then that sort of turning into a rage that's somehow women's fault. It reads to me that pornography must be fueling this in some way, because we know that, like you just say, that young men are watching it from a very young age. Porn addiction is through the roof, and I think that it's a tsunami that's about to really break. We've got young men as young as 12, 13 with erectile dysfunction. It must be contributing to this kind of online misogyny. And what do you think? Do you think it's part of the problem?
It sounds like it's so much easier to not take responsibility, to put the blame elsewhere, to make women the scapegoat. And maybe he is feeding into insecurity in men, or men not belonging in somewhere. But you could do so much better with that.
Yeah.
And why does it have to be filled with hate and abuse and power and control? I think it's damaging. It's really concerning because it's not just vile, it's toxic. I
was going to ask you about this phrase toxic masculinity. I was just curious because a friend of mine, a female friend, she put on TikTok the phrase toxic masculinity, and the amount of comments that she got, particularly from a lot of men saying those two words don't go together, being quite angry about it. What do you think about the word toxic masculinity?
Then isn't that the example if they're being quite angry at it towards a woman?
Right.
Well, I just think of Andrew Tate and his brother when I think of toxic masculinity.
Right. Is it exclusive to men, or do you think there's toxic femininity as well?
There may well be. I mean, There may well be.
I think it's a really, really interesting space, and I think it's a very dangerous space. And the fact that people are calling for it to be seen as terrorism just kind of shows you just how worried I think maybe young females need to be.
It's indoctrinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a form of brainwashing.
Yeah. I guess the rage that is causing these young men now to go out, and I think that's what inspired Adolescence, was Stephen Graham was reading news articles of young teenage boys like stabbing other teenage girls just through rage, and he was thinking, how can this happen? I guess the darkness in their heart was planted maybe in a similar way to the two boys that did it to you. For there must, there's a reason for everything, I guess.
Hurt people.
Sure.
But not all hurt people will go on to hurt people, so it doesn't mean you can't use it as an excuse.
No.
But I think there's a lot of unhealed trauma in our society.
Absolutely. One thing that I was really, really interested in, sorry, I was just trying to find a quote, because I really, really love this. And you said the way in was the way out, which I just think is really, really good. I just, just towards the end of this conversation, really just talk about the hope, the light and the joy, because, you're in such a strong place now, despite what happened so early on. And it's a really powerful quote, that the way in is the way out. It's something I preach a lot in treatment centers, but not a lot of people want to go there. Someone's listening to this who's really in the depths of despair around some past traumas, or maybe they're in it right now. What kind of words of hope and encouragement would you give you? Because it is takes an awful amount of courage to go in there, doesn't it? To get out.
After a while, when I was caught in all the denial, I saw that I had the potential to drive myself crazy, and it wasn't the memories or the pictures that I was being shown that was causing my mind all the unrest. It was my refusal to believe it. So I thought, oh God, I could actually be back in a psychiatric ward with all that I'm trying to do to myself by refusing to believe. So that's when I thought, okay, I'm just going to just show me everything they did to me. Just let me sit and watch the whole show. And, I've used many therapies in the past. And it was when I was taking plant medicine that I just said, okay, enough running. Stop running from everything. Just sit and watch the show, because that's really what I did. I just sat and watched it. When I say the way in was the way out, when I wasn't focusing on it, I was doing everything to avoid going to those difficult spaces. But when I actually went into the things that we tried to avoid for years, that is when it took the energy out of it. The sting just dissipated from all of the stuff that I was holding on to. So it just neutralized it. It didn't have that effect on me anymore. It was like going to a cinema, a multi-screen cinema, and watching the same film over and over again rather than avoiding it. After a while, you think, oh yeah, I know what happens. Oh yeah, that bit. Yeah. And then it was like, okay, so I've watched the film. They didn't kill me. I'm still alive. I know I'm not what they did to me. I'm not my body. I'm not even my name. We're all so much more than what happens to us. We're not the events in our life. But this didn't happen overnight. You want some hope, but it was a process. It's not a sprint. It is a marathon. It really was. And many, many years of therapy. But it was always, my intention was, I'm going to heal this. I'm going to recover one day. I'm going to get past this. And something just always drove me to that end.
I mean, it really showed so clearly in your book how much more you had to go in terms of what happened to you, because without sort of going into the details, you retell what happened within the rape in the first instance with the two boys, I think twice in the book. Yeah. And then the second time you go into more detail. I must admit, I really struggled to read that chapter, because particularly by that point, I just kind of assumed that what I'd read in chapter 2 was the full, and then, to really go into the depth that you did really kind of highlights, wow, yeah, you really had to look at every single area to fully get to that place.
Part really worked for me as well. I had a friend who went to the same workshops as me, Joe, who lives in LA, and he was my editor for a while. And I had been asked to write my story down for the the teacher that we all went to the same workshops, and he used my story. And so Joe knew the full story, and he said, "You are going to include that in the book?" I said, "No, I'm not going to. I don't want people to know that, because then they really will look at me and be disgusted, and they won't want to know me." And all of my shame just was lying and speaking to me, and, you know, very busy in my head. And he said, "No, as a man," he said, "you really need to include that," because he just thought it was a woman being overpowered. He never really understood the level of violence or degradation that somebody could experience. He said, "It's so important that you put it down."
Yeah.
So I agreed. And then my publisher said, "We don't think we can publish that chapter." And I said, no, now I was in such a different place. I said, "No, you have to put it in. If I'm going to tell my story, this is part of my story. This is what happened. And I'm not ashamed of it anymore. You know, that's just what happened. They're just facts. They're just words on the paper." And so they decided it should come with a warning, which, you know, if you pick up a memoir of someone who's 13 and has been gang raped, you kind of know there might be some content of rape in there. I didn't really agree with it. But, you know, most people say to me that it was tricky, but they did feel they should honour me or honour my journey and read that chapter. And so it is in there, but it does come with a warning, that chapter.
Yeah, it was incredibly powerful stuff. You know, it's very brave of you to share that, but I think it really did. I think it was important as well, just to kind of see. I almost don't want to ask you this question, but I'll be dishonest if I deny the fact that I was just curious to ask you it. I kind of don't want to, but I'm going to anyway. Has it crossed your mind that those two boys, or indeed four, have seen what, you know, you in the media and come across this book? Has it sort of played on your mind?
It did to start with, but they were Americans. So imagine they're back in America. They were sons of diplomats, so they would have lived in London for a couple of years. It did occur to me. It also occurred to me that because I never reported it, they could have gone on and done this again and again and again. But I can't put my thoughts with them anymore. I gave them too much of my time in the past. They robbed too many years from me. So let them do them and I'll do me.
Absolutely.
You know.
I'm really sorry, but we're coming to the end now, and I'm really gutted because I could chat to Madeleine all day. I've been asking all my guests this recently. It's a new question that I'm ending all the podcasts with. What would you like written on your gravestone?
What would I like written on my gravestone? I guess unbroken.
Wow.
Yep. Oh, that's made me quite emotional.
Yep. That's amazing.
Yep.
You are unbroken and an absolute hero in my eyes. Oh. And it's been quite emotional meeting you today. And I'm just so honoured to have spent an hour with you, to be honest, because you're doing so much amazing work in this space. And, you know, people like you really are angels, really, coming to the aid of, like you say, so many people affected by these things. And you are unbroken. Well,
you know, it was people before me that gave me the courage to find my voice. So I'm just paying that forward. That's all I'm doing.
Well, you certainly are, with interest. And thank you so much again for coming down.
You're
welcome.
It's been
an honour to have met you today. Guys, head to the show notes right now. There's going to be lots of information on Madeleine, links to everything, where you can find her on social media, obviously her brilliant book and all her brilliant work. Go there now. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit subscribe. That massively helps. Leave a comment. Leave me and Madeleine a comment. We'll both read them and we'll get back to you. That would be fantastic. If you're listening to this on Spotify, hit follow. Give us 5 stars. That would be amazing for the algorithm. Do the same on Apple or Amazon and leave a review. That would be absolutely wonderful. And guys, I haven't let you down yet. I'm going to be back in 2 weeks' time with a brand new episode. But until then, look after yourself and thank you for watching or listening.